Now, dozens of primary school children in Minab have been killed while others have been injured following the Israeli airstrikes. Now, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson has condemned the attacks on cities. Meanwhile, the international community is being urged to respond to what Tehran described as a blatant act of aggression. The United Nations Security Council is set to urgently meet on the matter today. All right, for more of this, we are joined now live in our studios by Qaanitah Hunter, who is looking at the story for us. Qaanitah, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. What has been Iran's reporting at this hour when it comes, of course, to Operation Epic Fury, which is Trump's military campaign that started early this morning in terms of fatalities, in terms of how they're responding to this?
Yeah. So Iran is saying that they will not stop the attacks on Israel and U.S. bases across the region. It has been unprecedented and quite shocking to the rest of the Gulf, to the level and the extent at which Iran has been persisting throughout today with its retaliatory attacks. There has been no country in the Gulf besides Oman that has been unaffected by these missile strikes. In the UAE, there was some casualty. There's been repeated missile attacks on Qatar, with explosions reported in Doha. Similarly, we saw a statement just released not so long ago from Saudi Arabia and Riyadh, with Mohammed bin Salman calling that attacks on Riyadh and the southern part of Saudi Arabia as blatant, and condemning it, because we know that Saudi Arabia was warming up to Iran in some way, saying that they won't allow their airspace to be used to attack Iran. So a lot of movement in the Gulf states as panic has set down. The airspace has completely closed in that area, and Iran is saying now, with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps saying that they will continue these attacks unabated. We also heard earlier from an interview by Iran's foreign minister to NBC News, Abbas Araghchi, and he said that the supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei is alive as far as he knows. And that's an important consideration because, if the Ayatollah is killed, it would be a massive change and escalation in these attacks. And they saying that this regime change that Trump is speaking about is actually impossible. Now, the question is, how long can Iran sustain these attacks on U.S. interests across the Gulf? And, that's why there has been a call by Russia, by France, by China now, that the UN Security Council meet. But again, you know that the U.S. has veto power there. But more importantly, I think there is talks of what's a de-escalation, and a lot of panic that this cannot continue like what we saw last June.
The fear is a wider, deeper regional war, and this could have severe impact on civilian especially. What does that look like? Who would be a part of that wider regional war? Who would be affected by it?
Yeah, so more importantly, it would be Qatar, and that's because they hold the largest U.S. base in the Middle East, and there's already been several attacks, and there's been, efforts to shoot down these missiles on Doha. With this video coming out from Doha, residential areas being affected. You saw attacks on the UAE, and this is the first time. Remember, the last time around, when the U.S. and Israel struck Iran, there was a sort of a counter effort on Doha and on Qatar, but now we're seeing it across the GCC. The fact that Iran went as far as attacking Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. There's been missiles that have fallen in a residential area in Jordan. And so the fear up until this point has always been that any effort by the United States to go to war in Iran would cost the entire region. And that's why you saw that flurry of activity over the last few weeks with Gulf leaders trying to convince U.S. President Donald Trump that it's not a good idea to go to war with Iran. Now, the interesting bit is that yesterday there was an announcement made by the Omanis, and remember, the Oman is seen as the Switzerland of the Middle East in the fact that they always sort of neutral, and they've been trying to broker negotiations between the US and Iran up until Thursday, where there were talks in Vienna. And we heard from the Omani foreign minister speaking to American media just yesterday, saying a very unprecedented thing, that Iran had actually agreed not to stockpile enriched uranium. And so the question is, why then did Israel and the US agree to, or to what triggered the attack, what they call was preemptive? And the question that Simon raised earlier is, how does Trump get around this in the US Congress?
Yeah. The foreign minister also saying that the national forces or armed forces will deliver a decisive and fitting response to the enemy's and aggressors. I mean, does Iran have an army that is capable of responding to this?
So last year, remember in June last year, when there was that 12-day war, there was a lot of analysis around Iran's capabilities, and obviously they were wounded from those attacks. And so there has been the sort of general analysis that Iran may be speaking and thumping its chest more than the capabilities it actually has. With the foreign minister conceding that one or two of their commanders were killed. But at the moment, there's a complete shutdown in communications in Iran. They're saying that they must not report on any of the sites that are actually being targeted, to not empower the enemy in some way. We saw now from the Israeli Defense Force and Mossad calling on Iranian citizens to send images of the attacks there, so they know what they look like. Basically, we don't have a full picture besides those images of the school in the southern part of Iran where 51 students, at least 51 students are killed. We don't know the extent of the damage, but we do know that the intention of this mission is regime change. And so the question is how far this will go, and whether the military assault and full-out war on Iran will result in that military or in that regime change, which will essentially mean the killing of the Ayatollah or the president. And so that's why I think this United Nations meeting, Security Council meeting, whenever it sits today, is absolutely important in trying to get the first round of de-escalation, or a commitment to de-escalation, because the consequences now are not just contained to Iran and to Israel. We know South Africans that are currently in Jerusalem talking about sirens going off. I spoke to someone in Jordan. They're saying that they've seen missiles similarly Doha, and it's a strange phenomenon in these countries that have been relatively safe for all of these years. And so for a country like the UAE to be under attack in this way, I think that it will be interesting to see whether there is some rationality, or whether there is an effort to appeal to the US to say halt, or these Gulf countries then decide to say, no, we will retaliate ourselves. And so then it becomes an all-out regional war as feared. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain have all said that they reserve their right to retaliate. And so it's unclear now whether they are preparing militarily to hit back at Iran, or they would support the US attacks on Iran. But again, this is now becoming an all-out regional war.
Yeah, you said Russia, you said France, I think it's Bahrain as well, who are supporting this call for an emergency UN Security Council meeting. We know why Bahrain might be there. Russia and France, what's their interest in this?
So quite interesting. We heard from Macron, who he just about 3 hours ago issued a statement calling for an urgent meeting of the Security Council. And so the important bit here is to understand the nature of it. What was this preeminent threat? Because these are the US allies, and the Security Council ought to know what was behind the US in the early hours of Saturday, committing to join Israel in the strike. You'd remember that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has been trying to convince Donald Trump to attack Iran for a very long time. In 2025, he had visited the US and the White House at least 7 times in trying to convince them. And again, at the same time, there had been this frantic negotiations around Iran's nuclear capabilities. So the question is, from the concession on Thursday and Friday that the Omani foreign minister had, who was the chief negotiator, to say they had now agreed to not stockpile, which was the major bone of contention in the negotiations around Iran's nuclear power. And so what then changed overnight to warrant this full-scale escalation and this what Trump is saying manifestly is regime change? The question is preemptive strikes allowed in international law, or is it illegal? And so what justifies it and what cover do they have will be an important thing in the maintaining of international law when the United Nations Security Council sits.
Qaanitah Hunter, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on and bringing that clarity for us.